Check the description for the following discount codes. A few people in the comments asked me to share my thoughts on the new Yaw2 from what they were called Yaw VR. Are they still called Yaw VR? Let's have a quick look. Yeah, sort of. Virtual reality motion simulator. They just call themselves Yaw Motion Simulator now, actually, according to the website. It was Yaw VR, at least from memory. So yeah, I thought, you know, why not? I may as well share my thoughts on the new Yaw2. So for those of you that don't know, I will put up some video footage that they've put on their YouTube channel throughout this video, so you can see what it looks like, you know, in operation. Because obviously words don't depict the best picture when you can actually look at it. This is, after all, a video-based content platform. We're on YouTube, so we'll get some footage up. And I'll just talk throughout this and give you my thoughts. So, it's going to be from a sim racing and gaming point of view, rather than like a business point of view, because they also target this for business users, if you actually look on their site. But to be honest, my opinion on that side of things is probably, and I don't mean business users as in like arcades, I mean like relaxation devices for people in offices and things like that. So I don't really think that's going to take off particularly well, but that's just my opinion. And again, this video is just a conversational video, so there's, you know, there'll be spec and facts and figures, but I don't have one, you know, to share any direct experiences with. So it's just my thoughts, just a conversational video. So yeah, from a gaming and racing sort of point of view, you got two options. They do a 2 DOF and a 3 DOF version. Now, the 2 DOF version is literally just pitch forwards and backwards, roll left and right, and then the 3 DOF version adds in yaw, which will rotate you on the spot. And this is what looks so good in their videos when you see them spinning around, because it does a full 360-degree rotation. Now, the base price of this is $1,090 or £768, and this is for the 2 DOF version, so without the yaw, the rotation, and without a seat. £768, $1,090. If you want the 3 DOF version, and really in my opinion, if you're going to buy something like this, you do want the 3 DOF version, because why not? You know, it really adds another degree of freedom there, another, you know, that rotation that you wouldn't have otherwise. So for the 3 DOF version, and with a seat, because presumably you're going to want a seat to bolt to it, it's a bit like buying a, you know, a racing rig, you know, a cockpit without a seat. Unless you happen to have your own that fits on, you're going to need one. So 3 DOF with a seat, $1,570 or £1,106. These prices are obviously correct at the time of making this video. So us guys here in the UK, 1,100 quid for the 3 DOF with a seat. And obviously you've got to remember, this isn't just a motion platform like what you might buy from DOF Reality or Next Level Racing that bolts to an existing cockpit. This is a cockpit and a motion solution all in one. So 1,100 notes for a 3 DOF motion cockpit effectively is pretty reasonable value, I'd say. You know, if we compare the 2 DOF seat mover from Next Level Racing, which is what, £2,500 or something like that, and it's just a 2 DOF seat mover that you bolt to a rig, you know. And even the DOF Reality 2 DOF motion platform, their M2 that I used to have, that was it £800 or £1,000, something like that. Again, and you have to bolt that to a rig already. So for 1,100 notes to get 3 DOF, pitch, roll, yaw, and a cockpit that you can bolt sim racing equipment to or flight sim equipment to, you can see why it's got so many backers on Kickstarter, because for that price point, it seems like a really good value deal. Now they do a pro version, excuse me, and this comes with upgraded, more powerful motors, a USB hub, a smart plug, a mains outlet socket, programmable LEDs, and it's either audio in or audio out, because if you look down the website, at one point it says audio in, and another point it says audio out, so it's one or the other. And that is $2,120 or £1,493. So it's about a £300 to £400 upgrade over the original price. And to be honest, if I was looking to buy this, which I'm not, because I'm not a massive fan of motion, and I'll lightly touch on that later. If I was looking to buy this, I would just spend the 1500 notes and get the Pro version. Not because of the USB hub, the smart plug, the main socket, the LED, none of that, purely because of the upgraded motors. Because in my opinion, faster, more powerful motors, if they're available, are important. Now I don't, obviously without using it, I don't know how good the standard motors are, but for that little bit extra money, if you're looking to, I think I would do it. Again, this is all my opinion, of course. Now, there's your prices. So, my opinions on the actual thing itself. The way it looks compared to their original Yaw2, yeah, I think is a massive step in the right direction. It looks so much more substantial, so much beefier, more comfortable. You got the a proper seat attached to it rather than just like a semicircle, like a ball that's been cut in half that you sit in. So I think they've really made good progress in the way it looks aesthetically. It just looks more substantial, everything looks a little bit beefier. The range of movement on it, we have 40 degrees of roll, so that's left to right, 70 degrees of pitch, which is your backwards and forwards, and then a full 360 degrees of rotation. That's a lot of movement, and the 360 degrees of rotation, it claims it can do that in 1 second. The actual movement rate is 360 degrees per second. So you could be sat there and literally 1 second later, you could have done a complete rotation. I think that would actually give you a pretty good feeling of, rotational G-force at that speed being spun round. So that's quite impressive. It also says it has built-in vibration. And then it says for speed, acceleration, engine RPMs, or from getting shot, for example, when you're in a game. Now, I'm not sure whether this is a sound-based type of haptic feedback, whereby it just works so the low frequency effects from the game generate the vibrations, or whether it's going to take it from game telemetry like us sim racers use when we set up tactile feedback on our rigs. I couldn't actually see if it said that on the website anywhere. Maybe it supports both, because it does take the telemetry from sim titles, to use with the movement, with the motion. So you'd like to think it also uses that telemetry to run its vibration feature. It doesn't say if it's a vibration motor or whether it's a tactile transducer. It just says built-in vibration. But it'd be interesting to see how that works. So it all looks good. It looks like it moves really fast. It looks comfortable with a proper seat attached to it, and everything looks beefed up, and just generally a big improvement over the first one. And I think the price is pretty reasonable for what it offers. So things that come to mind when I look at this: the 360 degree rotation feature. Whilst it's good, all of our sim racing and flight sim gear is wired. So you can't actually, if you picture yourself, this probably applies more to flight sim than sim racing, because we shouldn't be spinning around in our cars. But if you're in a plane or a helicopter and this 360 degree rotation is available, you can spin round and round and round and round and round. But we're all tethered by cables. So I don't really, whilst it's cool that you can do a 360, unless you've got 100-meter long USB cables, which obviously wouldn't work, you're just going to spin round and eventually yank your cable out, or you're going to have to limit how far it rotates to prevent damage to the cable. Still a cool feature, but I don't think we'll ever actually be spinning round and round. Now, when it comes to using something like the Quest 2, which is a wireless VR headset, if the game you're playing or the experience you're using in the Quest 2 supports this Yaw2 platform, then that of course will make use of the 360 degrees of rotation, because you have no wires attached. The Quest itself has no wires, and I believe it will connect up over Wi-Fi, and obviously the controllers are wireless too. So I can see getting some quite cool experiences, or perhaps motion sickness inducing experiences, for me at least, using something like a wireless VR headset. Maybe when the Deca gear gets released again, that might support the games for that might support this. And this is the thing, it needs to be supported by the individual titles for it to actually work. You can't just grab, you know, a roller coaster simulator on the Quest, hop in your Yaw2 and expect it to move, because that roller coaster simulator would need to actually be able to communicate with the motion platform, with the motion rig, and say, you know, move this way, pitch that way, roll that way, as you're going through the experience. So it does all need to work together. So yeah, 360-degree rotation, probably going to be useful going forwards with titles that support it. Wireless VR, not so much for sim racing and flight sim, because their cables are all going to get caught up. And then the next thing that springs to mind, talking about sim racing and flight sim, or more so sim racing here really. When you see these videos that I'm going to share throughout this video, they demonstrate it using the Logitech steering wheel and pedals. And these are very light. They don't weigh a lot because they're mostly plasticky. You know, the pedals themselves are actually metal, but they're not very heavy compared to, you know, Fanatic stuff, for example. And when it comes to any sort of motion platform like this, balance and weight distribution is really, really important. So how can I explain this? If all your weight was too far forward, for example, and the motion platform wanted to pitch you forward, that weight is in its favour. It would help the motion platform pitch you forward. It will help the motors because the weight is forward. If you then wanted to pitch really aggressively backwards, the motors have then got to lift all that weight that's not centred because it's forward, up and backwards. And this is where things, when I talk about balance, are really quite important, because you either need super strong motors, as in way over and above what you would really need it on a balance system, to be able to not care that the whole thing's out of balance, you know, and your steering wheel and your pedals and your legs are outstretched and everything's forward at the centre point, and just be able to roar you backwards and forwards and left and right without any issues because the motors are mega powerful. Or, like with the Next Level Racing motion platform and the DOF Reality motion platforms, you need to perfectly balance those. Otherwise, the motors will have no problem tipping you forward in this example, but when they try and pitch you backwards, they can't, and they can't lift you up because you're too far forward. So I'm not sure, again, without being able to use one, whether they've chosen motors that are so powerful it doesn't matter, and there is that upgraded motor option as I mentioned earlier, or whether you're going to have to, in some way, balance this platform, this rig out. Now the first one suffered with this issue. People were actually putting counterbalances on the back and things like this to try and get it to work properly. So that's still going to be something that, I mean, you know, I'd like to have one just to have a play with it, but you know, I'm only a part-time YouTuber and my channel doesn't earn me enough money to spend 1,500 notes on something just to bring it in, test it, and sort of then potentially move it on. It's a little bit out of my reach at the moment, but I'd really like to have a play. But yeah, that balance and weight distribution springs to mind. You know, as I say, they use the Logitech stuff. If you put the heavier stuff on, probably not going to be the best. And then moving on from that, my thoughts move to your usual sort of sim racing cockpit analysis, which is how rigid does it look? Does it look like it's going to flex or wobble at all? And, you know, looking at the construction, the first one was quite flexy and quite wobbly. And this one looks like it has been beefed up, like I mentioned right at the start. But the pedal tray is still out on quite long legs, albeit they look a bit beefier than before. And then the tray itself reminds me very much of the PlayStation Evolution pedal tray, which is angled up and doesn't have really anything in the way of support on the tray itself. So that's definitely going to flex both at the tray and potentially the legs that extend out in front of it as well. Again, just my thoughts, I haven't used one. Then if we look at where the steering wheel mounts, you've got those tubular uprights, which look, or not uprights, they come out and then do a 90 degree. They're quite beefy and look quite nice. But then the actual deck itself that you would fix your steering wheel to appears to be unsupported in the middle. So I imagine we're going to get some flex forwards and backwards and perhaps a little bit left and right there. Now again, we really need to bear in mind what we're getting for our money here. For 1,500 notes, it's not only a full cockpit, it moves with 3 degrees of freedom as well and vibrates, some sort of tactile feedback there. So we can't expect aluminium profile rigidity here for this price point, and we can't expect the best motion in the world or the best tactile performance in the world. But it still might be a good, fun, all-round package for people that don't mind the sort of, you know, drawbacks of a bit of flex and what have you. I think really this sort of thing will do well in an arcade, if arcades even do well anymore these days, which they don't really. Versus like the more serious sim racer, you know, for those of us who aren't playing, I mean, I really only play for fun, but at the same time, I don't like a rig that flexes and wobbles, so I'm kind of in between. And I did have motion, as some of you will know, and I moved it on, and I'll explain briefly about that a bit later on in this video. But I think taking into account the price point, the package looks really very good, and I think a lot of fun can be had with it, and that's probably going to be what's key here. Now, the way the motion works, I touched briefly on the telemetry feed from SimTiles. It also supports non-telemetry motion, and how that works is by interpreting your controller or joystick inputs and then translating that into motion. So you can pretty much play anything you want and add some sort of motion into it. I imagine it works like if you push forward on the stick, then the motion platform will tilt you forwards, and if you pull backwards, you know, you'll go backwards and left and right and vice versa. So I'm not sure what titles you'd really want, you know, if you're playing you wouldn't use it on a beat 'em up. Maybe you'd use it, I don't know, top-down shooter or something where you're going up, down, left and right. Maybe you want to be thrown around. I don't know, but the option's there, and it could be fun to have a little play around with. They also say that the Yaw2 is designed specifically for gaming and to address the problem of motion sickness. Now, I get motion sickness when I play like Dirt Rally 2 in virtual reality, because you're being thrown around a lot, or the car's, you know, going all over the place. You're doing jumps and you're sliding in handbrake turns. I don't get it so much in things like R Factor 2 or any other circuit-based racing where everything's much smoother. But I was curious as to whether motion would help eliminate or reduce motion sickness. And I did a video on this a while back when I first got my motion platform. And the conclusion, very briefly, was it helps in some areas but not in others. It helps in areas where what you're feeling correlates with what you're seeing, but when your brain says you're doing one thing and your body's doing something different, it doesn't help. And that sounds a little bit confusing, doesn't it? How can we explain this? So motion systems in sim racing, for the most part, work like this. When you accelerate, you get thrown back in the seat. When you decelerate, when you brake, you get thrown forward in the seat. Now that's actually, from our body's point of view, the opposite of what happens in real life. So just bear with me a second here. In real life, when we brake from, say, 60 miles an hour, our body is traveling forwards at 60 miles an hour. When we apply the brakes, the car slows down. And what happens is our bodies, push tight against our seatbelts. The seatbelts, the harnesses you might be wearing, are actually holding you back. So your body's trying to move forward, but the car, in effect, is trying to pull you backwards. Now, that is like it's negative G-force, obviously. So you're trying to move forward your body's trying to move forward under braking. The seat and the seat belts are actually holding you back. In sim racing, what happens when you brake is the seat pushes you forwards, which is the opposite of what actually happens in real life. So in real life, you're moving forward, the seat holds you back. In sim racing, you're not moving anywhere because, you know, we're in a rig, and then the seat just pushes you forward. Now, what happens when you accelerate in a car in real life? The seat pushes you forward as you accelerate. So you're sat there and you launch off the line in real life, and the car moves forward, the seat moves forward, and so you feel force in the back of you pushing you forwards. In sim racing, that's what happens when you brake. The seat pushes you forward. So your body gets pushed in the direction as if you were actually accelerating. And then when you brake, your body actually gets thrown, I just said that backwards, didn't I? When we brake in sim racing, our bodies get pushed forward. And then when we accelerate in sim racing, our bodies get pushed backwards. So it sounds a little bit confusing, but so in those situations, we're actually getting the inverse. Our bodies feel the inverse of what we would in real life. In a perfect world, when we accelerate in a sim racing title, our bodies would be pushed forwards, just like being launched, down a strip in a real car, so that we feel that G-force, that acceleration from behind, from pushing us. And then when we brake, ideally in sim racing, you'd actually want the seat to almost slide backwards so that it pulls tight against your chest to feel like when you apply the brakes in a car and your body still wants to go forward, but the car is pulling you backwards. It's probably come out way more complicated than it needs to. But this is why, for me, some forms of motion feel natural and other forms of motion in sim racing just never feel quite right. And it's because you're actually feeling the opposite G-force to what you would in real life. Now, obviously, there's no easy way to solve this, because in real life, G-force is a continuous force that we feel. And the same applies, to when you're cornering left and right. You're under a certain amount of acceleration in a direction, and when you steer, your body wants to continue in the direction it was traveling, in the direction of its momentum, and so you're pushed against your seat or your harness, the bolsters in the seat perhaps. And again, in sim racing, the seat actually pushes you and you feel pressure as if it was the opposite direction. So it's a little bit confusing. But anyway, this is a massive sort of digression from what we're talking about. But that's why when they say it's designed to address the problem of motion sickness, I think in some ways it does a little bit from my experience with motion, but in other ways it actually confuses the brain because you're feeling the opposite sort of motion to what you actually would in real life. I hope that was clear, because it sounded like it came out really messy, but you can let me know. So yeah, these are really my thoughts on the new Yaw2. I think it looks like it could be a lot of fun. I think the price point is really super competitive. I think it looks great. I think they've beefed it up quite a bit more. The addition of the vibration tactile feature is good. Everything looks that little bit beefier, like it's going to flex a little bit less. The motion generated. The generated motion from controller and joystick inputs could be fun in certain titles if it doesn't support telemetry output. And I think all round, a lot of people are going to have a lot of fun with this. As I say, I would like to get one to have a little try myself, but at the moment, that's definitely way down my theoretical or dreamy shopping list that's in my head of things I'd like to buy and have a play around with. But yeah, I hope some of you found that interesting. As I say, it was you guys asking for my thoughts on it, so I thought I'd have a little look and share that with you. Share your thoughts in the comments with me. Give me your thoughts on the things that I've spoken about and the points that I've brought up. And I'll see you guys all in the next one. As always, take it easy.